And what stood out really quickly to me is the difference between what felt like success to the client and what appeared to be success to me in the session, and then what that success actually looked like in the real world. If you're measuring the success of your hypnosis work by what happens in the session, there's a really good chance you are misreading your results. And most people don't realize it until they've already shaped their entire process on top of it. Because when I was new, many times in the moment, it looked right and it felt good. The client was responding, the session felt complete, they felt amazing. And it's easy to walk away thinking, man, that landed. And sometimes it did. But what I've seen over and over and over again is that what feels like change in the session doesn't always hold once they're back in their life. And if you're not paying attention to that part, you don't actually know what your work is doing. You only think that you know what your work is doing. You only know what it looked like while you were there in the session with them. And this is one of the things that quietly shapes the quality of a hypnotist's work. And they don't even realize it's happening because at a certain point, the way that a hypnotist is measuring their success looks accurate. It feels good, but it's not. And once that happens, everything built on top of that starts to drift. And it's not in a big, obvious way at first, but as confidence builds on this false foundation and someone begins to take on more challenging clients, that's where you begin to catch it. And it's just enough that you notice those results start to get a little inconsistent. And then next thing you know, you're questioning yourself. Most hypnosis trainings teach you what to look for in the session. Did they let out a big deep breath? Did they sigh? Did their body shift? Did their speech get softer, quieter? Is their breathing slower, deeper? And yes, those things matter, but those are not a reliable, definitive measure. One, that they're actually in a hypnotic state, much less whether or not something actually changed in the session, that something changed in a way that it's going to stick and it's going to hold. What you're witnessing is a moment. It's telling you what their experience is right then. What it's not going to tell you is what happens after. And this is where I see the gap. I have been in many, many rooms where people are actually taught to not reach out to the client after the session because you might break the session. And what this means is that the hypnotist and even the client can walk out of the session feeling confident and amazing. The client feels different. They declare, I'm never doing that again. No more chocolate, no more cigarette. I don't want that glass of wine. Yes, I can speak on stage. I never want to bite my nails again, whatever they're coming in for. So it feels complete. And that becomes the reference point for success. But that is not success. That's not where the results proves that it's a result. The work proves itself later. It proves itself when they're back in their real life and when they're under pressure, when the old pattern normally would have shown up. It's important to help the client see that and for you to see and to understand that. When they're under pressure, is that shift still there? or did they fall back into the pattern? Or maybe instead of falling into the pattern that was there, they fall into a new, different pattern. And most hypnotists aren't consistently tracking that. And I'm not talking about at the end of the session and how do you feel? What do you think about this? What if this happens? What if that happens? I'm not even talking about in the session, because when I have clients in the hypnotic state, I will pressure test the result. Whether I'm doing directed work or I'm doing conversational work, I will pressure test the result. But the client at the end of the day knows that they're in session with you. They know that they're not out in the world. So how is it going to hold up in the real world? And how are you going to measure that days later, weeks later, months later? Did your work actually hold up? Was the shift real? Or did it fade away the minute they step back into their real environment? Because that's the only place where you can see what your work is doing. And some people will say that doesn't matter. And I'll say that's someone who doesn't believe in their own work and they're not taking responsibility for showing up to do their best. It doesn't mean we control what the client does afterwards, but it reflects a lack of commitment to doing the best. So I'm going to share with you, I had a vantage point in this field of hypnosis that most people will never, ever get. I was inside of a coaching program for over 3 years where I was referred clients. It was not my coaching program. I had no vested interest in the success of the coaching program, in the success of the people in that coaching program, but I did have a vested interest in my clients achieving success to what they reached out to me for. So from the moment I had that opportunity, I did what anybody who has ever read or studied research would do. I began to observe and I would take notes, and I kept all of my clients' papers and I would watch them in that environment. I would watch how they approached their problems, how they talked about their problems, how they interpreted change. This is so important. How they interpreted change, what they perceived to be a shift and what was an actual shift, and how their stories would unravel all of it. So I would get to see what happened not only after the session, but some of those people stayed in that program for 3, 6, 9, 12 months or more after they worked with me. So I got to see the long-term results, the good, the not so good, and everything in between. And it helped me to grow and refine my process so much because I wasn't seeing what was just happening in the session. And what stood out really quickly to me is the difference between what felt like success to the client and what appeared to be success to me in the session, and then what that success actually looked like in the real world. And that's where the gap is. The session can feel powerful, the client can feel different. But if that shift can't integrate and stabilize, creating a foundation, if it doesn't integrate in how they show up in their real life, then the work isn't as complete as it needs to be for that lasting result. And if you're not tracking it, you can't refine what you're doing. You keep repeating the same thing that seemed to work. And over time, it creates a false measure of success. You will trust your sessions because they feel effective. You will trust your process because you've seen those responses before. But as you get more challenging clients and people dealing with deeper, more challenging issues, you're going to start to see an incremental shift in the results that are showing up because you haven't been calibrating to what actually lasts. So those results start to vary. And if you're not careful and you don't catch it early, you will find that you have drifted completely off path from what's effective. And it's not because you're doing something that's obviously wrong. It's because you continue to build upon something that was never truly, fully verified. And what you thought was working wasn't the thing that was actually working. So this is why I'm so particular about the way that I approach hypnosis. I don't care if it looks like it worked in the moment, it can look beautiful in the moment. What I care about is whether or not it holds. And other people will tell you that if the client said the change was there, and don't reach out afterwards. And I'm telling you, that is a recipe for your work becoming diluted and watered down and not holding, because that's what matters to the client. How is it going to hold up in real life? That's what will tell you if your process is precise. And when you start looking at your work this way, everything changes because you stop relying on what you think happened and you start paying attention to the results that you're actually getting feedback on. And then from there, you can refine, you can adjust, you can see clearly what creates lasting change and what doesn't. Without that, even good hypnotists can end up with results that vary way more than they should, not because they lack skill, because there are thousands of skilled hypnotists out there, but it's because nobody ever showed them how to measure the work that they're doing in a way that actually reinforces the positive shifts and reflects the reality of what they're doing with their clients every day.